There has been some sort of extension in PLI schemes, and this is an interesting headline which says that Prime Minister Modi has approved 17,000 crore production-linked incentive schemes, which is PLI, for IT hardware segment. What does it really mean, Karthik?
So, what is IT hardware? It's our laptops, our desktops, server equipment, mice, keyboards, hardware.
And essentially that you can touch.
Yeah. So, the positive angle here, as opposed to software and services that India has been a leader in, and specifically not linked only to chips and circuitry, is the fact that now you have the likes of Dell, you have the likes of Lenovo, you have the likes of so many computer companies, computer manufacturers, who will now be incentivized to come and start manufacturing in India. So, it actually opens up the floodgates for a lot of companies that were initially looking at China as the only and most obvious choice of producing manufacturing hardware. I think now that shift is likely to happen in India with this extension of the PLI scheme, specifically the 17,000 crore rupees on hardware being incentivized. Now, again, what is that eventually going to do for the country, for the economy? I think the last PLI scheme, which which ended in the last fiscal year, saw about 3,200 crores worth of rupees worth of investments coming into India. Now, with the 17,000 crore rupee outlay, the government is expecting about 2,800 crore rupees to make its way into the Indian investment sector. And this becomes private investment by way of availing a subsidy which incentivizes them manufacturing in India. And if the estimates that the Union Minister, Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav, has come on record to state are to be believed, then about 75,000 jobs are likely to be created.
75,000 jobs, that's a substantial
so
number
that's a
of jobs.
substantial
Absolutely.
number. And it's important to look at the linkages with what has recently also happened in the mobile manufacturing in India. And $11 billion worth of mobile exports is a sizable number. And India is, I think, by far right now the second largest exporter of mobile phones in the world. And I think if a similar fillip can be given, because these are relevant sectors, and you're talking about high investment purchases here. A laptop or desktop today is going to cost you nothing less than 60,000 upwards to purchase. So is the case with premium mobile phones. So these are investments that a consumer makes in in owning a product which is again contributing by way of tax, by way of GST back to the government's kitty. The third important factor here is that with these multinationals potentially availing of the PLI scheme, it's not just the Indian consumer market that gets catered to, but India also becomes an export hub. So, just a couple of days back, Shweta, you and I were discussing on the import-export deficit, and that deficit had shrunk, but it had shrunk also on account of exports reducing and imports conversely reducing as well. But one shining sector there was electronics exports, and this fits in beautifully with that export story that India is hopefully trying to get an edge over China on. And it's going to pave a very good future for the country. But these subsidies have to be time bound. These incentives have to be
time bound, as you're given to understand.
Yeah, so they need to be. So of course, I mean, once the 17,000 crore outlay exhausts, pretty much the subsidy ends. But yeah, I think it's important to give the initial subsidy. It's important to give the initial discounts, as we happen to understand in consumer parlance. And thereafter, the entire ecosystem, competitive forces of the market need to take over and then help businesses sustain the investments they've made in India.
That is correct. And the tenure of the program, we are given to understand, would be applicable for 6 years. Government is expecting to invest about 2,430 crores in the scheme, creating an upward direct employment of 75,000 people. So that's a substantial chunk of people that the policy will be catering to. Rakesh, PLI, interesting, and we've been discussing how electronics, and India is hoping to get an edge on electronics, manufacturing electronics and exporting electronics, because that's where we've done well as opposed to other segments, and this scheme is likely to boost that. I also want to quickly get you in, for all the viewers who are watching at this point in time, as to how will it benefit, if at all, the end consumers?
Interesting. Three things to look at when we discuss PLI. One, that it has revived Make in India, which had almost gone comatose. So, what has happened is that Make in India, in the first, instance, was a big fanfare announcement by the Modi government. But what happened is that for the first 5 years, it didn't generate any significant activity. Then came in PLI, and it has actually, reignited the Make in India program. So, fair point that it will lead to more jobs. It will give a perk up to the manufacturing activity across sectors. IT hardware is very, very important. It's linked to many sectors. It's an economic multiplier in that sense. But the big question here is, Karthik and Shweta, we need to probe, if not, I mean, not necessarily probe, but at least ask and ponder. Do HPs and the Dells of the world need subsidy? Are they getting this subsidy to make and sell, desktops and laptops and rest of the, world. Uh, India is an important market. We do want manufacturing to come back to the stages that it was envisaged to be earlier, coming to. And is PLI the only way to make it happen? And it's all, in Government of India doesn't have abundant resources, so it has limitations of resources. And where do these resources go? So globally, while we celebrate PLI as a major success story, and the results are there for everyone to see, at the same time, one must question, is it fair that we give big ticket MNCs who have operations across the continents subsidies to make basic stuff like, laptops and desktops? So, just playing the devil's advocate. On the face of it, it will generate the momentum in the election year that it's expected. Big manufacturing companies will scale up their operations. There'll be announcements of jobs, facilities being upped or set afresh. But PLI needs to be reimagined from its core competency. Where does this money go, and where is it required to go most? Which sectors should get it the most? So already there is a pipeline of many sectors from business verticals which are clamoring for PLI to go there. And
Okay.
PLI does have, infinite budgets. So I think while we really look forward to big ticket companies coming in, we must also simultaneously do a review, at least a dispassionate review, whether this kind of incentive is supposed to go to big ticket MNCs to do some basic stuff in India, where the market is so huge that they can't escape not being here. Maybe the numbers will grow significantly in short term, but in medium term, if you sustain the PLI, is it the best thing to do? Already globally, some economists have raised a shadow over the PLI injections in manufacturing for global manufacturing.